Hello, Alaya, Olivia, Freya, Ronan, Jet, Nevaeh. Welcome to Storytime with Jeet, Naani. Merry Christmas to all of you. And today we have two special guests. Well, we have two right here. We got Lil Boots, Queen Elizabeth Boots, and we have Rainer. We've all met these guys, haven't we? Yes, we have. And two other guests are Carolyn and Scotty. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Scotty. They joined us before, didn't they? Remember stories? Yeah, steam train, dream train. And one more. What was that with the cow? Yes, Blossom. Blossom comes home. Well, today's story, there's Rainer. Today's story is another one about a little animal called the Christmas Day Kitten. Let's see what happens in this story. The Christmas Day Kitten. There's the Christmas Day Kitten. Isn't he just a beauty? Yes, he is. And it's by James Herriot. You remember James Herriot? There's James Herriot. He's a veterinarian. And the illustrations are by Ruth Brown. All the pretty pictures. Okay, let's see what happens here. Oh, there we go. Christmas can never go by without my remembering a certain little cat. I first saw her when I called to see one of Mrs. Pickering's much-loved basset hounds. There's Mrs. Pickering in her fancy house. I looked in some surprise at the furry creature moving quietly down the hall. I didn't know you had a cat, I said to Mrs. Pickering, who was a plumpish, pleasant-faced woman. There she is. Mrs. Pickering smiled. We haven't really. Queen Elizabeth is a stray. She comes here 2 or 3 times a week, and we give her some food. I don't know where she lives. Do you ever get the feeling that she wants to stay with you? I asked. Oh, no, Mrs. Pickering shook her head. She's a timid little thing. Oh, there she is, so timid. Just creeps in, has some food, then slips away. She doesn't seem to want to let me help her in any way. I looked at the tabby cat again. But she isn't just having food today. It's a funny thing, but every now and again she pops through into the sitting room and sits by the fire for a few minutes. It's as though she was giving herself a treat. Isn't she just the sweetest thing? The little cat was sitting very upright on the thick rug which lay in front of the fireplace, in which the coals glowed and flamed. Oh, so cozy. The 3 bassets, there they are. 1, 2, 3. There they are indeed. They were already lying there, but they seemed used to Queen Elizabeth, because 2 of them sniffed her in a bored manner, and the 3rd merely cocked a sleepy eye at her before flopping back to sleep. Look at those flopping ears, too. My goodness. Queen Elizabeth made no effort to curl up or wash herself or do anything other than gaze quietly ahead. This was obviously a special event in her life. A treat indeed. Oh, my goodness. Then suddenly, she turned and crept from the room without a sound and was gone. That's just the way it is with Queen Elizabeth, said Mrs. Pickering, laughing. She never stays more than 10 minutes or so, then she's off. Oh, there she goes. I often visited the Pickering home, and I always looked out for the little cat. On one occasion, I spotted her nibbling daintily from a saucer at the kitchen door. As I watched, she turned and almost floated on light footsteps into the hall, then through into the sitting room. She likes her sitting room, doesn't she? Queen Elizabeth settled herself in the middle of the pile of basset hounds in her usual way, upright, still, and gazing into the glowing fire. This time I tried to make friends with her, but she leaned away as I stretched out my hand. However, I talked to her softly, and I managed to stroke her cheek with one finger. Oh, look at that happy cat. Such a good veterinarian, such a gentle, kind man. Then it was time for her to go, and once outside, she jumped up onto the stone wall, and down the other side, there she goes. And the last I saw was a little tabby figure flitting away across a grassy field. I wonder where she goes. Wow, don't you? And that's what the vet says too. I wonder where she goes, I murmured. That's something we've never been able to find out, said Mrs. Pickering. Quite the mystery. It was 3 months later that I next heard from Mrs. Pickering, and it happened to be Christmas morning. Oh, look at that, all the beautiful holly. I'm sorry to bother you today of all days, said Mrs. Pickering apologetically. Oh, don't worry at all, I said. Which of the dogs needs attention? Oh, it's not the dogs, it's Queen Elizabeth's. She's come to the house, and there's something very wrong. Please, please come quickly. I drove through the empty market square. The snow was thick on the road and the roofs of the surrounding houses. The shops were closed, but the pretty colored lights, they were reflecting off the Christmas trees and winking in the windows. Oh, such a quiet scene. Mrs. Pickering's house was beautifully decorated with tinsel and holly, and the rich smell of turkey and sage and onion stuffing wafted from the kitchen. But she had a very worried look on her face as she led me through to the sitting room. Oh, look who's here. Queen Elizabeth was there, but she wasn't sitting upright in her usual position. She was lying quite still, and huddled close to her lay a tiny kitten. Let's look at that little kitten. Oh, so soft and gentle. I looked down in amazement. What have we got here? It's the strangest thing, Mrs. Pickering replied. I haven't seen her for several weeks, and then she came in about 2 hours ago, staggered into the kitchen, and she was carrying the kitten with her. She brought it in here and laid it on the rug. Almost immediately I could see that she wasn't well. Then she lay down like this. She hasn't moved since. I knelt on the rug and passed my hand over Queen Elizabeth's body, which Mrs. Pickering had placed on a piece of sheet, like that. Oh, she was very, very thin, and her coat was dirty. Is she ill, Mr. Herriot? Asked Mrs. Pickering in a trembling voice. Yes, I'm afraid so. Mrs. Pickering looked at me, and I saw there were tears in her eyes. Then she knelt beside Queen Elizabeth's and stroked the cat's head and the back, while tears fell on the dirty fur. Oh, the poor little thing, I should have done more for her. I spoke gently. Nobody could have done more than you. Nobody could have been kinder. And see, she has brought her kitten to you, hasn't she? Yes, you are right, she has. Mrs. Pickering reached out and lifted up the tiny bedraggled kitten. There's a little kitten. Isn't it strange? And on Christmas Day, I bent down and put my hand on Queen Elizabeth's, and then I went to the car. When I came back, Mrs. Pickering was still stroking the kitten, and the tears had dried, and she was bright-eyed as she looked at me. Oh, look at her, she's smiling. I've never had a cat before, she said. I smiled. Well, it looks as though you've got one now. It sure does. Look at that little kitten. Oh, so sweet. So sweet. And she certainly had. The kitten grew rapidly into a sleek, handsome, and bouncy tabby cat. Let's look again. There's a little kitten. And look at him growing. And Mrs. Pickering called him, do you know what she called him? She called him Rolando. He wasn't timid like his little mother, and he lived like a king. I think that's a good name for a king. And with the ornate collar, like right here, he always wore this, and he always looked like the perfect king. What's he looking at? Look on the windowsill. Who is this little guy here, little snail? Oh, our little Rolando is pretty excited. I watched him grow up with delight, but the occasion that always stays in my mind was the following Christmas Day, a year after his arrival. I was on my way home after visiting a farmer with a sick cow, and I was looking forward to my Christmas dinner. Mrs. Pickering was at her front door when I passed her house, and I heard her call out, Merry Christmas, Mr. Herriot! Come in and have a drink to warm you up. What a friendly lady. I had a little time to spare, so I stopped the car and went in. In the house there was all the festive cheer of last year and the same glorious whiff of sage and onion stuffing. But this year there was no sorrow. There was Rolando. There is our Christmas kitten. Not a kitten anymore. He was darting up to each of the basset hounds in turn, ears pricked, eyes twinkling, dabbing a paw at them, and then streaking away. Mrs. Pickering laughed. Oh, Rolando does tease them so. He gives them no peace, she laughed. She was right. For a long time, the dogs had led a rather sedate life. Gentle walks with their mistress, plenty of good food, and long snoring sessions on the rugs and armchairs. And then Rolando arrived. Look at him, look at him. He was now dancing up to the youngest dog again, head on one side, asking him to play, play, play. And when he started boxing with both paws, well, this was too much for the Basset, who rolled over with a cat in a wrestling game. Oh, so much fun. Come into the garden, said Mrs. Pickering. I want to show you something. She lifted a hard rubber ball from the sideboard, and we went outside. I wonder what she's going to show him. What do you think? Oh, yes, I think so. She threw the ball across the lawn, and who chased it but Rolando? He bounded after it over the frosty grass, his tabby coat gleaming in the sunshine. He seized the ball in his mouth, and he brought it back to his mistress. And look at these three guys. They're just sitting at the door. And he waited. Mrs. Pickering threw it again, and Rolando brought it back every time. Oh, my goodness. Funny little guy. I gasped, said the vet. A retriever cat. The Bassets looked on, unimpressed. 1, 2, 3 of them, unimpressed. Nothing would ever make them chase a ball. But Rolando, well, he did it again and again, as though he would never tire of it. Mrs. Pickering turned to me. Have you ever seen anything like that? No, I replied. He is a most remarkable cat. We went back into the house where she held Rolando close to her, laughing as the big cat purred loudly. Looking at him, so healthy and contented, I remembered his mother, who had carried her tiny kitten to the only place of comfort and warmth she had ever known. Mrs. Pickering was thinking the same thing, because she turned to me, and although she was smiling, her eyes were thoughtful. Oh, Queen Elizabeth, she would be pleased, she said. I nodded. Yes, she would. It was just a year ago today that she brought him in. That's right. She hugged Rolando again. The best Christmas present I've ever had. Aww. And there he is with his own little cushion. What a sweet Christmas story. The end. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, sweeties. And thank you, Carolyn and Scotty, too. Wasn't that such a lovely little story? Oh, there's Rainer. Yes, there's our big guy. And there's our little Queen Elizabeth. Yes. And we want to say we love you and big, big hugs to you. And Merry Christmas. Bye-bye, sweeties.